Shopify just announced their new Customer Accounts Extensibility, so you can now add custom functionality to the Customer Accounts pages. Just like with Checkout Extensibility, we can build these custom integrations that merchants can add at different points throughout the accounts page. These points are called extension targets, and there are quite a few targets where you can configure your extension to be added. We can see in a video here that a member of the Shopify team tweeted out. Just kind of showing you where you can inject all of your extensions. So this is the order status page, and you can see there's a bunch of different places on the profile page, and there's even a full page extension that you can add, like you see here. So you can add an entirely new page to the customer accounts dashboard. These targets are basically parts of the UI where you can hook into and inject your extension. They also give you a number of APIs that you can use to get data from different places like orders and meta fields, gift cards, and a bunch of other ones. And just like with Checkout Extensibility, you have predefined UI components that you can use to build with. You can't use normal HTML elements when building it since it uses a custom UI and you aren't able to access the DOM. So what you see here in the documentation is what you can use. But you can also use all of the UI components from the Checkout Extensibility in addition to the ones listed here. So there's a lot more than these 5 that you see here right now. And right now the Customer Account Extensibility is in developer preview, meaning you can only use it on dev stores to build and test your apps, but it can't be used on live apps until it's officially released. Now let's go through a quick demo where we'll get everything set up so we can test these new features, and then we're going to add a small extension to the Customer Accounts page. The first thing I'm going to do is create a brand new development store, which you can easily do from your partner's account. Just come in here and click Create Development Store. And then we want to make sure that we select the Store to Test and Build option. We'll give it a name. And there we go. And then you want to make sure, this is the important part, that you select the Developer Preview option, and then you select Checkout and Customer Accounts Extensibility. If you don't do that, or if you don't have a store that has this enabled already, then you won't be able to see what we're going to look at today. You won't be able to see any of the extensions show up. So double check that you have that selected and that you're on a store that has this. And then we are going to select Start with Test Data and then Create Development Store. Once our store is created, we're going to click here on Settings and then go to the Customer Accounts tab. And we're going to click Edit on this top card here. And then let's click the box to show the login link. It'll just add the link to the header of our store for the customer accounts. And then you want to make sure that you select New Customer Accounts. Let's also turn on the self-serve returns. Just for this demo, we're going to use that a little bit. And then if you do want to update, just to point out, if you want to update the branding or the styling of the customer accounts page, it's tied to the checkout page. So you can see here, these customer accounts inherit branding from checkout. So if you go to your theme editor, you can make edits to the checkout page, and those style changes will apply to the customer accounts page as well. So we'll save those changes, and then we're going to go ahead and open up our store. If you click the little I button here, it'll take you right to your store, and then we see our accounts icon in the top right corner, so let's click that. And then on this page, we'll just put in our email address, and then that will send us a code to our email. We'll log in with that, and then our customer account will be created. Okay, so our customer account is created. We're logged in. The default page is this orders page, but we don't have any orders. So let's fix that real quick by going back to our store, and we're going to add an order and assign it to our customer so we can see that show up there. We'll go to the orders page in the admin. We'll click on Create Order, and then we're going to just assign a product here. Let's do compare as price snowboard. You should see all the same or most of the same products if you did the populate with test data. And then we're going to come here and select our customer, and you want to make sure that you select the email that you just barely signed up or created the customer account with so that it's tied to our account. Then you'll select collect payment, mark as paid, and create order. And then let's go ahead and just fulfill this as well, and we'll confirm on this page. Okay, so now the order's created. If we come back to our customer accounts page and refresh that, then we now see our order. We see a buy again option and then a request return option. So now what we're going to do is create an extension that adds an option to the order action menu, which will show up right here where this button is. We're going to start by opening up our terminal, And we're just going to type in the command that we all know and love to create our Shopify apps, which is npm init at shopify/app at latest. We'll go through the options here, and then we don't want to click start with remix. We want to do the extension option. Once that's done, we're going to cd into our new directory, and then we're going to open that up in VS Code, and then we're going to come right back to the terminal, and we're going to run another command that will generate an extension for us, because right now the app is basically just an empty app. It doesn't have anything in it. So we're going to run npm run generate extension, and it's going to give us a couple options to choose from. You want to select your partners org, create it as a new app, and then on this one you want to come down to the Customer Account UI extension, give it the default name, JavaScript React. So this is going to scaffold an extension for us, and then we can use that as a base to build on. All right, now we're going to come into VS Code and check out the code that it generated for us. If you open up the extensions folder, and then you'll see a Customer Account UI extension folder, and then there's a few options here. We'll kind of go through and look at them. But this generate extension command basically generated two extensions for us, a full page extension and a menu action extension, which is actually what we're going to do today. So these are the source files for those extensions under that source folder. So you can see here, this is what's actually rendering the code that's going to show up at that extension. So in this case, for the menu action, it's just going to be a button, and we'll see what that looks like in a second. And then the other important file here is the shopify.extension.toml file. So this is where all the config for our extensions live. And this needs to match up exactly with what the rest of our folder shows. So you can see here, there's an option extensions.targeting, and then the module, which gives us the path where that extension is rendered at. And you can see it's giving us the path to this file right here. And then the target, which is order action menu item dot render. Same thing, we'll see another one for the full page extension. So if you did make any changes here, if we changed this file name of this extension, or if we changed the target or the extension target, if we changed where we wanted it to render, then we would need to come in here and update that as well. You can also specify other capabilities like API and network access, which we're actually not going to need today, so we can just delete all of that, and so we'll just have the extensions targeting in here. So let's start the app up, which you can do by running npm run dev. And you want to make sure when it asks you what store, you want to make sure again that you select the one that we just set up, or another store that has the dev preview with checkout and customer accounts extensibility, or else you won't be able to see the changes that we're about to make. All right, once that's running, you can press P to open up our dev console here, and you can see our extension targets. You can click on those to see. We're going to open up the menu action, and then what used to be the request return button is now an action menu, and you can see right here that we have this new option for the full page. And that's just, again, coming right from our code. If we go back to the, let's minimize this. How do I do that? Okay. If we come back to this menu action extension file, then that's exactly what's being rendered here. So for this little demo, what we're going to do is change this button, this menu action extension, to be a leave a review button, and then that button will trigger a modal where we can leave some feedback on a one-question survey. We're going to keep it simple today and just kind of checking out what we're able to do with the extensions. So we'll come back into our menu action extension file, and let's actually rename this to review action just to make it clear. And then let's get rid of the translation content in here, and we'll just put in the text, leave a review. And then we also want to get rid of this to prop. Okay. And then, yeah. And I mentioned that any changes that you make in the file names or anything, then you need to update the TOML file as well. So let's go ahead and do that. we updated the name of this one to review action. Again, if you made those changes and you didn't update the TOML file, then I think it just wouldn't build, but you for sure wouldn't be able to see the changes. So you need to make sure that these match exactly what's going on in the rest of your folders. All right, now that that's saved, we can go back to our accounts page. Let's refresh, open up the action menu, and yeah, we see the text was updated. Pretty simple change. And then if we click that right now, nothing happens. So we need to set up another extension that will trigger on this menu action click. So let's go back to the docs and see what we can do about that. If you open up the targets, and then the order action menu, again, is what we're working with. So let's open that up and see what is available to us. We see this first one, which is the menu item.render, and that is the button that we just set up. If we go back to VS Code and back to this review action file, we see this is the extension target, order action menu item.render. And that's exactly what this is, order action menu item.render. And that, again, that's that button. There is another extension target related to the action menu, and that is order.action.render. If you read the description, it's a modal, basically just a modal that opens as a result of clicking the action menu item.render target. So when you click on that button, it'll trigger this modal. And let's actually just copy this example code, and then we'll go into this full page extension file and we'll replace everything in that with what we just copied from the docs. You got to remove this little bit right there so that it works properly. Okay. And again, we changed the extension target. Before it was the full page. Now it's order action render. So let's copy this, go to our TOML file, and just update the target there. Let's just update the name as well while we're here. We'll just call it review modal, and we'll update this one as well, review modal. Okay, so let's go back into the review modal, and let's get rid of these translation texts again. For the title, let's say, again, just leave a review. For this button, which is the primary action on the modal, let's just say submit review. And then for this text content, we'll just say hello for now. Okay, so let's save that and then go check out our changes on the customer accounts page. Also, just to point out, if you run into an error where things aren't working as expected, like if you click this and the modal doesn't open, check this dev console here and it'll tell you the status over here if there's a build error or something. I just ran into it. The code was fine, but this said it was a build error. So I just restarted the server and it was working again. So just watch out for that. If you get a build error, you might need to just quit the dev server and then start it up again with npm run dev. Okay, so let's test this now. We have our menu action extension button. We click it and there is our modal that appears. Cool, and it's working just as expected. This submit review button right now, we'll just close it. And then right here, we're gonna put a one question survey asking about the product in the order. So coming back to our modal file in VS Code, we're going to go ahead and add the UI components we need. If you look here at what's already existing by default, we have that customer account action component, which is necessary for this file. And it's just kind of like the modal wrapper or the modal itself. Of course, we have the primary action button, and we have this API object that we're using. So this API gives us methods and some other data, like it'll give us the order ID. It gives us this close method to close out the modal, and we'll be using that a little bit as well right now. Let's change the text in this text block, and we're just going to say, are you, whoops, not caps, are you satisfied with product from shop? And then product and shop, we're going to make dynamic in a second. So it uses the real product from the order and of course the real shop that you're on. Then below that, we're going to add a choice list component, and we make sure that pulled in from the right place. Yeah, we want to bring it from UI extensions React. So make sure all the imports of this file will be coming from this UI extensions React customer account. even the ones that are shared with the checkout extensibility, they're all accessible or able to be imported through this one import. And this choice list component is basically just a radio input. So we have our choice list wrapper, and then within that, we're going to add a choice component. And let's do two of them. One of them is going to say yes. One is going to say no. And we want to make sure we give these IDs, which will basically correspond to the value of the choice. Then we'll come up here, make sure that choice is imported, again, just from the same import. And choice list is actually a controlled component, meaning we have to manage the state ourselves with use state. So let's add a state variable here. Just call it choice and set choice. And then let's give it a default value of yes. So it'll default to have this value selected. And then on the choice list component, we're going to give it a value prop of our new choice variable. And then the onChange prop, we're going to just put it to set choice. Okay, so let's save and check out our new modal. We'll refresh our page. And then again, come down here, select leave a review, and something went wrong. So let's check out console. Use state is not defined. Okay. Rookie mistake. But sometimes my auto import doesn't work, so keeps me humble. Now we come back to Google Chrome and we see our choice list and our question, and this is updating as we would expect. Now let's make this dynamic and include the actual product and shop name. So when you first glance through the available APIs in the documentation, let's go to the API page. You'll see a lot of these listed here. For example, the order and shop. But something important to note is that these are only available to the order status page. So we actually can't use these. So for example, here on the order status page, you can just use the use shop hook, get the name, domain, and everything. We can't do that with the on the action menu extension. So what we'll have to do is use the Customer Account API and query the data that we need. In this case, we're going to query the line items for the current order and then also the shop name. And this is pretty much just going to be a GraphQL query that we make to this endpoint right here. So from this Customer Account API example, let's just copy the use effect and the query, and then we can kind of use that as a base in our modal file. So we'll paste that down here. So first, let's update this query. And I'm going to change this a bit so it is just returning just the query itself and not an object. Yeah, looks good. Okay, so for our query, we're going to pass in a variable called ID. That's of type ID. And then instead of customer, this query right now is getting the customer's first name. We want to get the order instead, and we're going to pass in our ID variable. And then what we want returned is the line items. And this is a connection, so we have to specify the first amount that we want to get, which in this case, this order only has one product, and this demo would only work for one product. So we're just getting the first product for now, and that'll work for, again, just for this demo. Since it's a connection, it's going to return edges, which each have a node, and then this node is going to have the actual values of the product. And all that we need from the product is the name. And then in addition to the order, we're also going to query on shop and just get the name. Great. So now we just need to update the fetch body here to include our new query and also the variables that we're going to pass in, which we just have the ID variable. So we'll turn this into an object. The query is going to be this customer name. Let's just update this to just get data query. And we'll set that there. And then for the variables, it's going to be ID. And I mentioned before that this API object, or this use API hook, returns the API, which has a lot of things that we can use, like this close method. It also has an order ID property, which is exactly what we need to pass in here to get more data on it. So we're going to do API.order ID. And then at the bottom of this use effect, let's add a dependency array, and we'll just put the API.order ID in that. And then let's wrap this fetch call in an if statement, because we want to make sure that the order ID exists before we make a fetch call. We also need to add a new state variable for our returned data down here. So let's go back up here. We'll add a data prop or a data variable, again with use state. And right here, from the example, it was setting the customer name. And we actually just want to set data and set it equal to data. This right here we don't need. Okay, so this JSON response has a data prop in the first in the return value. So we're just going to set our state variable to the return data. Okay, so now we should be fetching that correctly. We should be setting our data correctly. Let's just log that out to the console just to make sure that it's coming through correctly. And then we can kind of see the structure of our data and how we can put the product in shop down here in the text. So we'll save that, and then let's go check out our customer accounts page and just refresh everything and try again. Okay, again, I get an error. Use effect is not defined. The auto import has failed me again. Okay, there we go. And then in the console, let me see if I can make this bigger. Yeah. We see our data, which is an object that has an order and a shop. Shop just has the name right there. Order has align items, which has an edges prop, and edges is an array. Then we have an object in there with node, and then that node is basically just the product, and the name is accessible right there. So it's a little messy. You could format this if you wanted, but for our use case, we're just going to grab it directly. Okay, so that was the hard part and the bulk of what we need to do. Now we just need to take those values that we see here that we returned from our fetch and plug them into our text block here. So to grab the product name, we're going to grab the order prop on our returned data, and then we're going to get the line items off of that. And then that has an edges, which is an array. So we'll grab the first object in the edges array, which will have a node property, which again is our product basically. And we'll grab that with name. I'm going to add some of these in here because I'm paranoid and don't want to see any thrown errors. Yeah, we probably don't need that many, but I'm going to put them there anyway. And then the shop name is a lot simpler. We'll just do data.shop.name. Okay, so we'll save that. And then one last thing, if our data isn't defined, let's just return null, and that'll kind of prevent any jittering, like with the text appearing or disappearing and appearing while the data is loading in. So we'll save that and then go check out our modal, and it looks like it worked correctly. Oh, I think we need a space there. From, okay. Okay, it's looking good. Okay, so let's refresh the page and try everything all over again. Manage. So, customer placed an order, they come into their accounts page, they click on their order, manage actions, leave a review. Are you satisfied with the compare at price snowboard from customer accounts test 1, which is our shop? You can select yes or no. In this case, yes, we are very satisfied. Submit review. So this is just a very basic example of what you can do with customer account extensibility. We only looked at the order action menu targets, but you can see there's a ton of other ones. There's a lot more that you can do here, but I hope this has been helpful to go through and kind of get a closer look at how customer account extensions work and help you kind of get started to dive into what's possible here. And there are a lot of possibilities of what you can do here, and I'm excited to keep exploring and maybe build some useful extensions in the future myself. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. I've got some very big videos coming soon where we are building apps from start to finish and showing you every part of the process. So you definitely don't want to miss those. And if you have any other questions, leave a comment down below, send me a DM on Twitter, or send me an email, and all that info will be in the description. So thanks for watching.